I kind of wonder what the consumer perception is right now. Amazon was trusted for so long. I'm thinking something like Jopper Approved may have an advantage now is no, we're not selling the stuff and we're outside and our whole thing is to provide legit reviews and et cetera, et cetera. So that may be very valuable.
Hey everyone, I'm Scott Brandley.
And I'm DJ Sprague.
And this is the Ecommerce Traffic and Conversion Podcast.
Today we have Michael Cottom as our guest. He's a SEO guru. I've had the fortunate opportunity to know Michael for several years now. He was actually referred to me from a very trusted advisor as a highly capable and highly skilled technical SEO guru. And we've used him on many occasions to get us through some pretty technical issues. And he's come through, as a shining star. And he really is a guru, and we continue to use him. And so we wanted to bring him on our podcast today to share him with you because although he's very well known in the space, if you're not aware of him, you need to be. Originally, he was a software and web developer. He's been a technical SEO consultant since 2009. I don't even know they had electricity back then. He focuses purely on Google and organic search. He's spoken at search conferences, including MozCon and Engage, and done Whiteboard Friday videos for Moz and SEO articles for Moz, Raven Tools, Acton, and many others. He's worked with over 1,200 businesses around the world, ranging from tiny startups to enterprise businesses like Carfax, JD Power, and Chanel. By the way, did you know you and I both worked with JD Power? Did we talk about that, Michael?
No, I don't think we did.
I don't think we did either. But yeah, I did. I did a lot of work with JD Power. I knew David personally, and I had my office with my agency in Huntington Beach, and he was in Westlake Village.
Oh, awesome.
And I went up there about once a week. And super, super neat guy. Little story about him. Of all the cars in the world, of course, he started the automotive awards and review business back in 1969. So he's a real pioneer in the reputation management, reviews, and award space. And he was exclusive in automotive for decades. But of all the cars in the world that he could have drove, he drove a police version of the Ford Interceptor. And I asked him, why in the world do you drive this car? And he had it literally as brand new. It was a police version. And he said, I like to be discreet, but I like to have power when I need it. So that was his car, little known story. But in any case, welcome to the show, Michael. We've been really excited to have you and been looking forward to this for some time.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, how did you get into SEO?
Well, it was really an accident. So as DJ said, I've been a software developer and web developer for 100 million years, doing very nerdy things ranging from, while I was still in college, I was on a very small team creating microwave landing systems for Air Force One and US Navy fighter jets in assembly language. And then I went from there to IBM Canada headquarters, the other extreme, wearing a suit every day, doing mainframe database stuff, to teaching programming classes and all that sort of stuff. But we got to right around 2000, I had an idea for a honeymoon travel and registry company. And so I started a little business and I built out the website and CRM and all that sort of stuff. But one of the things I had to do is go to school in SEO to get traffic for this site. We had this great idea and this great product and stuff and travel agents and services and things, but we had to get clients. And those kinds of terms are really, really competitive. Terms like Hawaii honeymoon packages, Fiji specials, Tahiti vacations, things like that. And so I went to school in SEO, and right about that same time, Rand Fishkin was starting Moz, and I got to know him. I don't even remember how we connected, but then he consulted to us for a little bit. And when I ended up selling that company in 2008, Rand and a bunch of my other friends in the SEO space knew I didn't have anything to do anymore. And so they kept throwing projects my way. And so that just kind of accidentally snowballed until where we are today.
Yeah, that's a great story. Nothing like having to learn something as a motivator, right? I mean, you had to do it to survive.
Yep.
And that is a competitive space, right? Travel and and the whole wedding industry is very, very competitive. I would like to ask you your thoughts, because this is obviously very recent, but what are your thoughts on the new March 2024 Google algorithm update? What have you seen? What are your insights? Why do you think they did it? What's your analysis from the upshot of that?
Well, I'd say that Google's made their intentions clear for quite some time as to what they're looking to reward in terms of what makes great user experience. And so we see things like core web vitals, and then talk about helpful content and page experience and things like that. But we also see with this explosion of AI over the past year or so, kind of the idea of the outsourced copywriter who just knows nothing about your topic, doing research and coming up with content for your site, being multiplied by 100 times, 1,000 times by AI. And so we have this plethora of content all over the web that's written by people or computers that have no real experience with that. They're just regurgitating, researching and regurgitating. And Google's been pushing back on that with the helpful content update, with things like looking for original images, as that would be an indication that you actually went to that place that you're writing about your travel blog, or you actually held that new Nikon DSLR in your hands and actually tested it yourself, and you didn't just regurgitate what you read in other reviews and the Nikon literature, et cetera. Not to pick on Nikon, but so they're looking for indications of even little things like, so Cyrus Shepard, who used to work for Moz and is a buddy of mine in the SEO space, he did a study a couple months ago on what factors he saw on web pages that won or lost in the last 3 Google Core updates. And one of them was that it was a win was the presence of first-person pronouns. So if you're writing an article about this new Nikon camera and you're actually testing yourself, you might say things like, I took it up to Smith Rock in low light situations, this, or we found, or things like that, versus how AI tends to write it, or, external copywriters who just regurgitating and paraphrasing are writing. So interesting little things like that.
That's really interesting. First person pronouns. Love it. That makes a lot of sense. And of course, unless you wrote the instructions for AI to use first person pronouns, and of course, injected some original images, then that would be a clear signal. It's interesting. You said experience in terms of actual first person experience with the location or the product. Thinking back to EAT, Google's EAT, experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, that would be a clear indication if it's written by AI or a hired gun that doesn't have experience or expertise or both in that topic. It's going to be clear in the copy.
Yeah, absolutely. So that launches me onto my little soapbox about EEAT. So if you've paid a lot of attention in the SEO space, especially on Twitter, there's been a raging battle going on as to whether EEAT is a real thing and it impacts rankings, it's part of the algorithm, etc. And my take on this is that Google's come out with this acronym EEAT as kind of a way to explain to the unwashed masses how Google works. And so some of this, I think, is nothing new. I think that the T is kind of referring to good old PageRank. If you got a lot of links from strong, trusted sites, you must be a trusted resource. The A, so I'm going backwards to it here, the A, the authority, is probably something like, okay, is this your first article you ever written about this Nikon camera? Because you mostly write about SEO like me, and you're just excited about your new camera. And so you have one article out of your 500 in your site, so you're not an expert in cameras, or is camera equipment all you cover? So number of articles and percentage of the site is probably being measured somewhere. The I'm going to jump all the way to the beginning of EEAT, and this is the original images thing. So experience, did you actually have experience with this product or the destination you're writing about, or read the book you're reviewing, or whatever it happens to be, right? So we've covered that already. And that little E in the middle that's been there longer than the first E, for expertise, what Google wants to do is be able to look at an article and say, okay, this article on SEO was written by Michael Cottam, and here's his LinkedIn, and here's articles he's written other places. Oh, he must know something about SEO. Versus I write an article about motorcycles. So while I love motorcycles, I'm not an expert in the field of motorcycles. And so I might have lots of page ranks, so all the trust stuff is there. And maybe I actually write about motorcycles all the time because I'm kind of obsessed with motorcycles. But it's not really an area of expertise. So Google wants to be able to figure this sort of stuff out. First of all, who wrote that article? And second of all, what are their credentials? The problem is, this is really easy to fake. If I want to, I could write an article for my blog, and I could put on the page and code into schema that my name is Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein wrote this, and here's all his connections. How does Google know Albert did or didn't write that piece, right? Until Albert sues me for, anyway. So that piece, I think, is out there. Google wants to be able to do that. Are they doing any of that? Maybe little tiny crumbs of it, but right now they're not even looking at bio blocks and looking at LinkedIn links from the bio block to see whether there's related keywords in your LinkedIn profile. So I think that that's in Google's dreams, but they're not there yet. Having said all,
what about the YMYL categories, your money, your life, with the human raters? They're certainly diving deeper into some of those resources, bios, links, profiles, et cetera, particularly if it's health related or, big money related, right?
So that's definitely true in terms of the Google quality raters teams and their guidelines. But keep in mind, what that team is doing is not actually tagging specific websites and saying, okay, this one's junk for this and this one is legit. They're basically giving data back to the Google engineers to see if their latest tweaks to the algorithm that are supposed to reward these things are lining up with real world examples. So it's kind of user testing or real world testing bits of their algorithm, and it might even be bits of the algorithm that aren't really released. They're just A/B testing to some of these quality raters. So yes, Google's been wanting to do that with your money, your life stuff for a long time. Originally, I think they actually did a pretty good job of this. I'm not quite sure what they were doing, and it might be really not much more than PageRank. With this latest March release, apparently Reddit is the source of all useful financial information and the source of all health-related information. And if you can't get the truth there, you can always go to Quora, right? And so this is clearly backfired, way out over their skis on this one. But
isn't that crazy how Reddit is dominating so many page one searches? Not only are they showing up in the top results, but they're showing up with multiple results. And then, of course, if you look at the new perspectives tab, it's Quora, Reddit, and social media. And it's wild.
Yeah.
It's really wild.
It's going to be rolled back a little bit. So if you think back, you might remember there was an announcement, probably you have to be as nerdy as me on the SEO side. There was an announcement in Google Webmasters blog, I think, recommending that webmasters no longer just use rel equals no follow on links within their content, but if it was a link within like a comment in a forum or social media post or something like that, they should flag those outbound links with rel equals UGC for user generated content. And then, hey, if that link was no follow, it was an ad, we'll make it rel equals sponsored. So this was a couple of years ago. Google was starting to get very excited about being able to get some data and value out of user-generated content. Makes perfect sense because you think about it, if something really is starting to go viral, you're going to see a whole lot of links on things like Facebook and Twitter and forums and things like that in the user-generated content before you get people writing about it, where you'd end up with a link in a blog post that would be a followed link. So it makes perfect sense that if Google wants to have, be on top of what's hot, what's the latest, what should people be finding in search results, they're going to need to look at what gets chattered about on social media. And that's far beyond just Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And it's beyond Reddit and Quora down to all these different kinds of individual forums where real people who are interested in whatever this little niche is have discussions about this new product or this thing that happened or whatever it happens to be. So that all makes tons of sense that they're going that way. I suspect that what happened is that they had this pretty good idea of how they could measure that, and were probably a little bit surprised by how much over the top Reddit and Quora and things like that performed in the search results versus forums and all the other types of social media out there. My guess is that was quite embarrassing for them, and they're going to end up dialing that back, and they'll have some sort of backstory about really what was going on, this sort of stuff. But it sort of feels in this past year or so, not just with this update, but some of the other ones, Google has kind of changed their mode of operation from where it used to be. They were very, very cautious, so they would test the crap out of something before it went live. I think what they're doing now is they're doing more changes, more major updates, and they're coming up with a pretty good idea in beta kind of form. They're throwing it out there because, hey, when you got 96% market share, what's one bad update going to really do? You get a bunch of press, and hey, all press is good, and you'll fix it in the next update a month later, or maybe not fix, but dial some factors down or up or things like that. So across the board, they seem to be just throwing stuff out there that has a larger impact and larger risk for people, and with less testing behind it. I think this last Christmas was the first time that they released a core update right before Christmas. In the past, they explicitly said, "Oh, we don't want to upset everybody right before the biggest shopping season because it might have really negative effects on certain businesses." Kind of feels like they've moved to, we don't really care. We're throwing it out there. We'll see what happens, So
yeah, they wrote the rule book, right? They like I say, 96% market share or whatever it is on any given day. They can do what they want. What are your thoughts on where they're going with their investment into Reddit? I know that they've invested, I forget what the dollar amount is, but I know it's in the millions. Do you think there's a correlation between their recent investment in Reddit and how Reddit is now basically at the top of search for many, many search terms?
So my instinct is that it's a bit of a coincidence. I think that Reddit is probably a much more authentic place for user-generated content than Quora, for instance, just based on the piles of emails Quora sends me asking me to comment on things, or I've been asked to. It's not true, right? And there's so much stuff that's clearly fake written on Quora. I think Reddit is a lot more legit. So I think for Google, it's a matter of it. They were probably paying a lot of attention to it because some initial testing showed that, yes, there was a lot of really useful, authentic user-generated content in Reddit. So in terms of a test bed, owning that makes a lot of sense, right? I don't really have any sort of conspiracy theory about they bought Reddit because they intended to boost Reddit's presence in search results. So then it'd be worth more money and make them more. I don't think any of that's going on. I think that, yes, they were focusing on it, and that is both why they decided to buy it and do stuff, and why it's surfacing higher in the search results. I think if you skip the medical and financial areas, the YNYL staff, Reddit probably is one of the best places on the internet for legit discussions with users. Doesn't mean there's not a lot of misconceptions and deception and things like that going on, but there is everywhere. You might say there's probably less there than there is on Facebook.
Interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah, it seems like the people are more engaged. They tend to bring more expertise, less opinion, more experience on Reddit. People actually seem to know what they're talking about. Not always, but more times than not, and provide backup data, links, support, resources, that they quote to substantiate their opinion or whatever it is. So it does have a higher caliber, I would agree.
There's another important difference between something like Reddit and something like Facebook or forums in general, Reddit is really well organized. So it's very easy in Reddit to drill down into a very, very specific sub niche of a niche. And then you end up with a lot of people who actually know something about that, talking there. Facebook has groups. Yeah. It's real loose collections of people, and no real qualifications for getting in. Not that Reddit has qualifications, but hopping in some place where you don't know anything about the topic and leaving a comment that proves that will get you ridiculed and thrown out of the room. It's pretty severe, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you get bombasted quickly.
Is there any strategic SEO things that you're doing with Reddit or UGC?
User-generated content is going to be a big deal. So Reddit is one example, and Reddit comes to the table with this huge range of content, but also an enormous number of backlinks. And no matter what Google says, backlinks still matter. You can get all sorts of garbage to rank with enough backlinks. Google's not nearly as good as they proclaim to be at filtering out what was staged, built, paid for, artificially structured, etc. And Reddit, with Reddit's links, those are legit, and so that's going to remain strong. That factor, if EEAT really was those pieces of the algorithm, as opposed to really a PR move on Google's point to explain what they do, that trust, those links still really, really matter. So Reddit's going to be there. Having said that, websites in general should be paying attention to user-generated content. So back in the early days of blogging and horrors like Blogspot and things like that, comments were enabled for everybody by default. And then, of course, comment spam went nuts with GSASCR tools that would spam millions of sites all at once. And so then the entire world went, okay, this is, first of all, we all go to Akismet to try to block the spam, and then realized that, for every 2,000 comments we get in our blog, one was legit anyway, and we just shut it all down, right? So the whole world went to comments. I'm sorry, I don't have time for moderating comments. So that's been shut down. Now, though, we're getting to the point where, so between then and now, then reviews came up. And so reviews with some moderation or, forcing little things like you must be logged in, you must be a verified purchaser, etc. So we've got this little kind of, dip our toe in the water in terms of user-generated content, only in the form of reviews, but not in the form of discussions. What I think what we're going to have to do now to rank well, and it might not be getting rewarded by the algorithm today, but I think we're going to be getting that where really soon, is consumer discussions besides the reviews about products, about services, about places, and things like that are going to become more important. And people will have to, suck it up and put the time in to moderate comments, because if you don't have that discussion back and forth, then you don't have what Reddit has, which Google is seeing as very, very valuable, is a bunch of people, some of whom are experts, having a back and forth discussion. If you think about it, so there's misleading and erroneous information on Reddit like there is everywhere. But if you think about what happens in Reddit when somebody posts something like that, is a bunch of experts chime in and go, nope, wrong, lie, that was misproven here, blah, 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 blah. You don't know what you're talking about. So if you're Google and there's a question and Reddit has an answer, you send them to that page. That person gets to read down that list, sees the misleading content, sees all those experts chime in and go, no, this is crap. This hasn't worked for 10 years or whatever happens to be. I think
right back to eat, because we always have to go back to eat for whatever it is. Obviously, backlinks, would be part of that trust signal. Social media signals are part of that trust signal. Domain age is part of that. Where would you put reviews in the trust ecosystem for Google?
Okay, so reviews are an interesting animal. As I'm sure you guys both know, there was a study in December that found that 43% of reviews on Amazon were fake. And that's across all of Amazon, which means that there's a whole pile of products there where that number is probably 92% or 98%. Um,
Right.
we've all gone to Amazon and seen a product. So I use an interesting little plugin in Chrome called Fake Spot. And when you're on um, any sort of website, it tries to extract and analyze the reviews and the seller and things like that. And so it'll show me on Amazon, okay, this seller is 2 months old, and they're showing, 2,700 verified reviews of some weird thing like a photoelectric switch that I ordered for lighting at my gazebo. Like, come on, 2,700 people didn't buy that product in 2 months, much less review, right?
Right.
Right.
The seller rating gets a D or an F, and you get all those little alerts and things like that. I think consumers are becoming much, much more aware. I mean, certainly those of us in the industry, we hear this all the time. It's our news. We know how many reviews are fake. We know all the places you can buy them, et cetera, et cetera. But I think consumers are getting to where they start to realize this. And while all these studies will show that, whatever percent of consumers always go look at reviews first, I haven't seen a lot of people, or I haven't seen any studies that talk about what percentage of consumers are aware that there's a lot of fake reviews, and how big do they think that problem is. That would be a really interesting study. Because I'll bet you those of us in the industry are all really on top of that number. I wonder whether consumers think that, okay, it's on Amazon, it must be good, but I don't trust them here, or it's on Amazon, it must be bad, because honestly, there's a lot of cheap garbage, especially in electronics, on Amazon with brand names we have never heard of, and the same product with 20 different brand names, and the product descriptions that were not written by anybody who grew up speaking English, et cetera, et cetera. And so maybe I kind of wonder what the consumer perception is right now, because Amazon was trusted for so long. I'm thinking something like Shopper Approved may have an advantage now. Is no, we're not selling this stuff, and we're outside, and our whole thing is to provide legit reviews and et cetera, et cetera. So that may be very valuable.
This has been great, because it's really cool to see your perspective from the SEO world, everything that's happening in Google and also in the reputation space. But for those that are watching, I'd love to get back a little more into your world, into the SEO world, and ask you what's going on in the world of SEO right now, and why is that? What are some of the challenges that you're facing?
So let's talk e-com sites in particular. With the last couple of Google core updates, they're very, very interested in this idea of original images signify you've got some valuable information. You didn't just regurgitate somebody else's stuff. If you're a big e-com store and you've got 5,000 products, and that's not a big e-com store, as you know, original images are tough unless you're the manufacturer. And even then, if you're the manufacturer, you have 5,000 products to take images of, and you probably have distributors you need to supply images of those products to their websites, as well as whatever you have. This is a real challenge. How do you come up with an image that's not either on all your distributors' websites, or if you're one of those distributors, how do you have an image of each of the 5,000 products you sell that aren't on 100 other big websites? And if you don't, Google's going to rate you as a tier below those that do have the original images. So unique content, images, video as well, although I'd have to say Google is still not all that good at recognizing an original video versus a much shared video. Sure, with YouTube they can do a little bit of that, but if you have your own embedded video or Wistia or Vimeo, something like that, they can't spot that. But so these things are important for ranking, but it's a real challenge to come up with that sort of stuff when you have a very large product set.
I'm going to jump to something here because this has always been at the top of my mind since I've been seeing it more and more, but the AI search results. So do you think e-commerce websites need to be afraid of the SGE
Right.
results taking their business? Because there's a lot of conversation around this in all of the SEO, websites and forums. And I personally don't like the results, but would love to get your thoughts and input on where that's going and how much of a threat, if any, you think that is for e-commerce.
Well, and also, can you explain what SGE is, just for people that don't know?
Okay, so SGE stands for Search Generative Experience, and it's Google's name today for the AI-generated answer at the top of the page, if you enable that. I think they're rolling that out to everybody in the next few weeks, if I remember. But those of us in the industry, of course, have had that turned on to see what it's doing for quite some time now. Basically, it's not ChatGPT. It's Google's version of ChatGPT, which they called Apprentice Bard, and Google's big on giving things many names and then renaming it every 2 years, just when you thought you knew what was going on. So it's that little block that sort of dynamically spits out and looks like it's being typed by somebody at the top. We can blame Bing for that with their ChatGPT interface for making it look like somebody's on the other end writing this. They pulled it out of the database in 1/100th of a second, and they're just making it look like, oh, somebody's talking to me. Anyway, we're all well aware that motion attracts the eye, right? So part of this is to try to make you feel like you're talking to this brilliant robot, but part of it is the thing is moving and building the thing in front of you, so that's going to draw your eye to it. Now, so do e-commerce websites need to be afraid of this taking their business? Well, on the one hand, like purchase intent queries like buy Nikon D5200 SLR, that's not really going to be much affected, because no matter what SGE pops up there, unless it's popping up a list of websites to buy it on, in which case, yes, you've got to somehow find a way to be in that list of websites. That SGE is good at answering questions. It doesn't do transactions. Now, having said that, what's probably going to happen if you type in buy Nikon DSLR, whatever the model is, the way at the top of the page, you're going to get this carousel of shopping results where Google does get paid when you click on that. So, but that's not SGE. That's been there for a long time, and that's not SGE taking your traffic. That's Google shopping and rearranging search features that's taking your traffic. If the query is something like, compare the Canon EOS whatever to the Nikon D5200, okay, now SGE is probably a pretty good source. And an awful lot of e-com sites have, over the past few years, because of advice from people like me, is built content that are like comparison articles or review articles, or, is the XYZ camera worth the money, or whatever it happens to be. Writing those kinds of content that grab somebody earlier in the funnel. They've not decided they want a D5200. They're reading reviews and they're comparing it to things. So that's earlier in the funnel. That for a long time has been a great source of traffic for people who then want to sell one of those. So if you have your comparison article and you're selling both cameras, if you get them to land in your article, whichever one they end up liking best from your article, you have the ability to buy it right then. Now, with SGE, that's going to take those people who might have landed on your article and all of a sudden have a pretty good answer up top with probably 3 references. And if you're in there, fingers crossed, well, then maybe you're back to where you were before SGE. If you're not in there, that user might not get further down the page to read your traditional, X versus Y comparison article. So e-commerce sites, I think, have a lot less to be worried about than informational kinds of sites, advice kinds of sites, where they get you to the site to read the article and then they make money on ads that are somewhat related. And I have a bunch of clients in that space, and the honest truth is that's really tough space, because SGE is answering those questions and you won't get the click to the page with the Google AdSense on it, or the ad driver, or whatever you're using for your ad engines there. And so you're not going to get paid. And so those businesses are in real trouble with SGE. E-commerce, a little bit less so, except people like me no longer have a trick up their sleeve of writing the comparison articles, because you're going to get way less traffic for those than you used to before SGE.
Interesting.
That makes sense. It's similar to what people were concerned about with the featured snippet early on, thinking that the featured snippet was going to be 0-click because the information is there. Well, it depends on the search intent, right? So if you're looking for what is the average temperature in Cancun, Mexico, and it shows the average temperature, you don't need to go to the website. However, if there's purchase intent, what's the best resort in Cancun, Mexico for under $200 a night? That's purchase intent. And that obviously that featured snippet is going to get statistically 35% of the clicks on page one. But if it's just general information, who's Michael Cottom, and I get all the information in the featured snippet, I don't need to go to a website. I got my answer, right? So again, it goes back to what you're saying. It's all about purchase intent. And if there's commercial intent in that search result, whether it be AI or whether it be featured snippet, they're still going to get the click.
Right.
But like you say, if it's informational, I got my answer. I'm good. Let's go.
I will say with informational, it depends on the depth that's needed. If somebody is going to spend $3,000 on DSLR, they're probably not going to make that decision based on a little SGE paragraph. What they will probably do is that'll give them a place to start. They might click on one of the references there, and they're probably also going to click down below. So on that kind of an informational, whether it's review or news story or politics, whatever, the SGE is going to provide a summary. But if that person is really looking for something in much more depth, then they're going to either dive into those references or scroll down below. Now, interesting, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a study a couple months ago maybe that showed that when SGE started showing their references, their 3 or 4 links down at the bottom, something like 80-90% of the links they showed were not in the top 10 Google search results. So that means you've got 2 teams at Google, and one team with traditional search says, oh no, we know how to decide who the authority is in this and what the best resources are in this, and it's these 10. And then you got the SGE folks are like, we don't like any of those answers. We think that the authorities are completely different, which means they've got very different algorithms behind that deciding what's an authority or not. So in the EEAT kinds of stuff, Google search is talking about EEAT, which really doesn't relate to specific pieces of the algorithm. It's just a marketing thing. But there are pieces sort of like that in the algorithm. But it looks like the SGE people threw that out and started from scratch with their own way of deciding what's authoritative. And that's
brings you back.
Get some pop. That's the fight happening at Google.
It's very true. It reminds me of the results in the perspectives tab, because you just have random people showing up. It could be a Facebook post, it could be Reddit, it could be Quora, it could be whatever. And authority, who knows, right? But there they are. And I think there's something to that, right? It's kind of very, very similar with the AI driven results, because you're right. I do remember reading that and some other comments about those links and those resources really not being vetted per se, or what you typically refer to as a authority on the topic.
Yeah. So we kind of started out with updates, Michael. As we kind of wrap this up, what do you think as far as like updates coming up in the future? What can businesses do to kind of be prepared for what's coming?
So people get very excited about, what factors impacted websites in the March update or the August update or whatever update we're talking about. I think we need to focus less on what was in that update and what's coming, and more on, if you look at what the quality rater guidelines are highlighting and what Google's writing about in their general recommendation to webmasters, they're painting a much more specific than ever before picture of the kinds of things they're looking for. So they're looking for indications that well, first of all, who actually wrote this piece of content, and then, do they seem to have credentials in that space? Would you trust them and believe their opinion on blah, 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 blah? Are there indications that this person really had firsthand experience with a product? So right now it's like, okay, first person pronouns and original images, but that's just 2 little tactical factors. They've told us what they're looking for. And so I think if you pay attention to that, there'll be things you're building into your website, like, for instance, bio blocks at the top of the page. There was Cyrus Shepard did that study and that showed the first person pronouns had an impact. But in his study, the presence or absence of a bio block didn't seem to correlate with anything. Doesn't mean they're not eventually going to get there. It probably means that they've looked at those bio blocks, decided they're way too easy to fake, and everybody's going to discover that and fake them early on. And so it's not affecting it now. But that's where they're going, right? So there's I'm from Canada, and so hockey's a big deal. And probably the most famous Canadian hockey player is Wayne Gretzky. And he has this saying, I skate to where the puck is going, not to where the puck is. And that's what we've got to be doing with what you're doing with your new reputation book, and educating consumers and providing the tools for the websites to show the consumers the legitimacy of reviews. And that's where the puck is going for the consumers. They might not, on average, realize the percentage of fake reviews out there today at Amazon, etc., but they will. It might be 6 months or maybe 2 years from now. And so you're skating to where the puck is going with that. And I think we have to do that with anything related to, Google's discussions of EEAT and helpful content and that sort of stuff. We know what they're really asking for, and we should stop arguing about whether it actually got into the March update or not, or whether they're measuring this position or that schema or whatever. It's like, we know where they're going. Why don't we do all those things and make it legit in those ways that they've identified that makes it better for a user? And then whenever Google catches up with their algo updates and manages to, isolate out the fake stuff or whatever, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, very, very good point. Scott's from Canada too, by the way. So you guys have that in common. Quick question today for e-commerce. Let's put our e-commerce hat on and where we sit today. What are 3 things you would look at for an e-commerce website for SEO? If you could only pick 3 and you had 15 minutes with an e-commerce client or prospective client, what are those 3 things that you would first and foremost delve into or kind of peel back and want to inspect?
Okay, so number 1 is going to be user experience and page load times. So regardless of the fact that it's now impacting rankings more and more and more, we've all known for 10 plus years that every second of additional page load time causes something like 7% of users to just give up and abandon and go to another site. So even if Google wasn't affecting rankings, get those load times down so that somebody, when they land on a page, can start reading the reviews or looking at the pictures or play the video or whatever without waiting, because you're just throwing away customers if you're not doing that. And it's a nice coincidence that if you do that right, your core web vitals scores improve and you rank better. But I'd say that's a good place to focus. The number of client websites that I've audited in the last couple of months with page load times over 20 seconds is insane. Some of these clients have traffic like a personal blog would have, and they've got like 9 different like heat map and click patterns and marketing and stop. You slowed the page down so much you don't have a customer visiting it to read the whole thing anymore. So I'd say page load times are a big deal. Now, having said that, who's the worst offender for slowing down page load times? Well, that would be Google Ads, Google Tag Manager, Google Maps, Google Fonts, Google reCAPTCHA, embedded YouTube videos. So a little on the hypocritical side, since Google is the source of most evil when it comes to bad page load times. But having said all that sort of stuff can be deferred to after page load complete. In fact, you can actually defer Google Tag Manager to after page load complete by just not adding the JS to include Tag Manager or doing the function call with the GTag calls until after the onload event happens and you can call from the body tag. And so you can push all that out there. So number 1 would be definitely page load times and user experience. And I'll kind of throw into that bucket layout shift, because Google does with Core Web Vitals. When ads obscure the page or move around a lot, Zoom should be very embarrassed, for instance, their interface. You log on to Zoom and you try to start a meeting, try to hit that start button. It's like whack-a-mole. That kinds of experience stuff that causes people to go, enough, I can buy this in other places. I don't need to put up with this. So UX and page load times would be 1. Number 2, back to what we talked about before, user-generated content in the reviews and making that rich, meaning videos and pictures. So people have stuff to look at and watch and listen to and get a real rich discussion. Compare that to 1,200 reviews that all happened the last month on some Amazon product made in China. Just throwing that out there. And it's all, between 22 and 36 words of review, and none of it is helpful. That rich stuff is going to make a difference. Going to make a difference to the users, but then it's also going to make a difference to Google as Google starts measuring it. So that would be two things. I would say the third thing for an e-com site is I would pay attention to indexation. And so there you're looking at Google Search Console. So do not do a site search and believe that gives you any sort of truthful idea about what's indexed. Site colon search in Google is interesting, but it's not at all accurate. You need to go to Search Console and see what pages are indexed there. And even there, the pages index report can be behind by a few days, but it'll give you a good idea. You need to be paying attention to whether Google's looking at your 5,000 or 50,000 or 5 million products, and are they indexing 90% of them or 30% of them because you don't have enough interesting, unique content? And so I'd say indexation is a big deal. You can't rank for something with a page that's not indexed.
Absolutely. Okay, that's fantastic. So I'm going to throw this at you.
Okay.
If you had to pick a fourth, would it be unique images and unique product descriptions? Because I know we talked a lot about that earlier.
So yes and no. So if you have a short list of products, and you have the ability to take pictures of maybe your top 5% or 10% bestsellers or highest margin products or whatever makes good business sense, I'd throw money at that, because that is going to make a difference, and that is going to be useful to the users who are actually looking at the product and deciding whether to buy it. If you've got 10 pictures of the product and there's only 3 on everybody else's website that the manufacturer supplied, that's going to be helpful both for Google and for conversion. Scaling is hard, right? If you have 1 million products on your site, doing the top 10% is not feasible. That's 100,000 products to photograph and upload. And so what do you do there? I think you've got to fall back on the user generated content, is make your customers do the work for you.
Or the 80-20, right? Look at the 20% of products that generate 80% of the revenue, and optimize those top to bottom in terms of the most profitable, second, third, fourth, et cetera. That might be a way to get some kind of impact and scale.
Yeah, and if you're smaller, if you have big ticket items and you've got 30 of them, spend the money on original images for the top 5, and then next month on the next 5, and then a year from now you'll be rich on all your top products.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, Michael, last question. This is the $1 million question.
Okay.
As an expert in your industry, what's one actionable strategy that you can share that you think would have the biggest impact on an e-commerce company right now?
So I'm going to land on the UGC again with the reviews, and enabling consumers to be able to add those reviews and add images and stuff is just a technical web developer thing. That's not such a big deal. The big trick is, how do you incentivize people to come back and add those reviews? Go beyond you bought this last week, will you review us now? And go to what we discussed a little bit before, where I detected that here's this range of 1,000 people bought this over the last year, and 920 of them never reviewed it. What can we do to trigger them to come back and write a review? Do we show them the most outrageous or disagreed with comment or whatever that was in all the reviews, and say, do you agree with this? And that sort of thing will get people going. Like, how do you incentivize that person to come back and stand up in their soapbox and say their bit about something that they didn't buy yesterday?
Did you know, Michael, by the way, you did a podcast last year with Perpetual Traffic, and yours was in the top 5, I believe, for the entire year.
Really?
Downloads. Yeah.
Wow.
So hats off.
Nice.
It was a great podcast, as yours always are. You literally are a deep, deep well of information. And that's why we were so excited to have you on, because you have more information on this technical stuff that anybody I know in the space. So,
Thank you.
but anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I was binge listening a few months ago to last year's Perpetual Traffic podcast, and they were featuring the top 5. And I think yours was number 2 or 3 for the entire year. So hats off.
Well, that was fun. We're very, very smart people. I like them.
Yes. So are you open for business? In other words, if people want to get a hold of you and work with you, are you available? What does that look like? Where do they go? How do they engage with you?
So just go to michaelcottam.com. And there's you can book a 30-minute free intro call to see if it's a good fit there. Mostly, I'm probably a good fit for people with technical challenges in SEO, or anything from startups to large enterprises. I'm typically pretty heavily booked up, but that's the place to start. And one thing is, I usually won't take anybody where they're a direct competitor to one of my past clients. And now that I've got 1,200 some clients, that's getting more challenging. But anyway, that's the place to start. Read a bit about me, see if you like what I have to say, see if you like my process and how I work, and then let's have a little Zoom chat and see if it's a good fit.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Michael. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us today.
You're very welcome. I'll throw a freebie out there. So we talked a lot about page load times and user experience, and a little bit about deferring Google Tag Manager. If anybody wants to see how to do that, go to my website. In the resources tab, there's a pull down for fast YouTube embeds, and that's more complicated than the Google Tag Manager thing, but that can be helpful if you're using YouTube, if you're embedding YouTube videos in your page, because that could add 3-4 seconds to your page load time. But also, if you just want to look at the source of my page, it's a simple WordPress site, loads in 2 seconds with embedded videos. You'll see how I'm deferring Google Tag Manager with a little function call in there. It's right at the bottom of the head section. You'll see the JavaScript call, and it's very simple. And I've got a bunch of other clients starting to do that as well. And I just came up with that, I think, a week ago. So it's steaming fresh, straight from the cow, right?
Fantastic. No, we love that. We love that you're offering something that our listeners and clients and prospects can enjoy and value. And we wanted to thank everybody for joining us on the Ecommerce Traffic and Conversion Podcast. Please like us, review us, share us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.